Radoslav Dragov, the head of blockchain in Europe in the research organization IDS, who is one of the most deeply involved into studying the blockchain and adoption of tokenization and other stuff, actually on the level of research and on the level of actual data, and not simply stories and storyteller and hype. So I think this is something that we really need, the objective view. Radoslav, it's a pleasure to see you here.
Likewise, Boris. Thank you very much for having me. I hope you're all safe. Thank you for having me, for watching this presentation. Thank you for the introduction. Just wanted to add a few points. As you said, I lead the European blockchain practice at IDC, and IDC is an international market research and consulting company. We focus on the tech landscape, which and DOT and blockchain is just one of the technologies that we cover, but specifically within DOT, we do quantitative and qualitative analysis of the DOT industry within Europe. And we also look at business trends within that industry and what key topics will define its future. So a lot of research that we're doing, but the topic that I want to discuss today is a topic that I'm very excited about, and I'm pretty sure a lot of the people watching will be excited about, is asset tokenization, and more specifically, why I personally think that it will thrive in Europe. And just wanted to make a quick clarification here that by asset tokenization, I mean the process of converting ownership rights in a particular asset. That asset could be both tangible and intangible, putting those rights on a token, on a blockchain. And here I do not include utility tokens, so we are not talking about ICOs. The previous speaker has some, I mean, a lot of us has post-traumatic syndrome from ICO, so here we completely exclude them. But getting back to the topic of asset tokenization, why we thrive in Europe, I think that if we have to go more systematically into that question, we can look at 4 factors that actually can influence tokenizations, and I've broken them down into 1, DOT adoption, then looking at a macro picture of the DOT landscape in Europe and how healthy it is at the moment and where it's going. Second is the security token ecosystem. So do you have enough companies to support asset tokenization? And that includes companies that issue the tokens, companies that provide a blockchain infrastructure, companies that are the secondary markets where you can trade those tokens. So do we have that in Europe right now? Thirdly is the access to investors. Obviously, if there are not enough investors, then your idea will just remain an idea on paper. And if you have these investors, how easy it is for them to actually put their investment into your project. And last but certainly not least is regulation, which is one of the big stumbling blocks when it comes to asset tokenization. And we're going to look at what is the situation in Europe, whether it's hostile or whether it's favorable for the development of tokens, of asset tokenization. Without further ado, let's go through them one by one. The first is blockchain adoption in Europe. And as I said here, we're going to have a look at more of the macro picture in Europe. And this is data that quantitative data that we've gathered through our research. First is the adoption rate in Europe, which is currently 16%. And this is not just our opinion. Every year we do a massive survey across the continent and across all major industries. We got nearly 3,000 respondents, and we can see that the adoption rate is 16% in Europe for 2019, which is quite impressive. But it's even more impressive if we take into account that that number has doubled in 2 years, in 1 year actually, from 2018 to 2019. And this is very much reflected in DOT spending. we have what is called the blockchain spending guide, where we quantify how much companies are spending on DOT technology in general. And we see here again that in 2019, it was about $800 million, and we projected to be 5.7 billion by the end of 2024, which is quite impressive. And we have taken into account here the impact, the negative impact of the COVID crisis. In fact, this is the highest growth rate of any major region in the world, because we do this blockchain spending guide worldwide as well. My colleagues in other countries provide that information, and we can compare it, and we can see that Europe is going to be the highest growing region in the world in the next few years, which is quite impressive. Not in absolute numbers, but in terms of growth rate. And last but not least, I just wanted to say here that we have the 40% of spending will happen in the financial sector, of DOT spending will happen in the financial sector. And we all know that when it comes to asset tokenization, finance and DOT development go hand in hand. So this is quite impressive for Europe as a region. And just overall, these numbers here, as I said, these are not just my opinion. We spend a lot of time and resources to get those numbers, but overall they show a very rosy picture of DOT development in Europe. But let's have a more micro look, or more specific look at the European security token ecosystem. As I mentioned in the second slide, that here, if you want to have a successful, well, any technology to flourish, you need a whole ecosystem of companies that actually support it. You need, when it comes to security tokens, you need several types of companies. You need companies that provide the blockchain infrastructure. This means the protocol on which tokens are launched. You need the issuant company that actually issue the tokens. You need investors. You need secondary markets, and everything. Each of these companies support each other in kind of in a virtuous cycle. So there was a massive research done at the end of 2019, which looked at the global security token ecosystem. And what the finding is that actually it's very much a duopoly at the moment. Most companies that kind of cater to that security token ecosystem are in Europe. Second is United States of America. Again, impressive. Both of them have nearly 40% of the market. Together, it's 80% and less than 20% for the rest of the world. So we can already see that there's a vibrant ecosystem already developing. And just look at, if I can get your attention more on the right-hand side of the map here, we see that Europe has a nice mixture of countries. Some of them have very high financial sector development, and other countries which are not necessarily in Western Europe, countries like Estonia, countries like Malta, they've actually embraced DOT technology. They banked on it, and they're putting a lot of investment, and are just more favorable to development DOT activity. So we have a nice mixture again of countries with high financial development and DOT activity, and we also have countries that have both, particularly Germany, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom, which not surprisingly have the highest number of these security token companies in Europe. But again, looking at the overall picture here, we can see that we have a very vibrant ecosystem that can support asset tokenization, and there is no, and we expect that to grow in the future. Moving on to access to investors, and as I said again in the beginning, this is not just about having these investors, but also how easy it is for them to invest. if we look at again a metric, let's say more objective metric, which is the Global Financial Centers Index for 2020, recently released, we see that within the top 30 financial centers in the world, 12 of them are in Europe, including London, which is the second most influential in the world. So you have a concentration of a lot of capital, and one thing that is unique to the European Union countries in particular is this scheme called passporting, which means that financial institutions and investors can very easily work or invest between European Union members. So there's very little friction, very little interference, and that enlarges the pool of potential investors in your project, which obviously is very important for any project to succeed. Moving on to the fourth one, which is probably it's close to being the most important one. Regulation, usually it is the big stumbling block when it comes to asset tokenization. Because in many jurisdictions in the world, there's just not much clarity there's not much clarity whether assets are actually covered by the existing regulation. Sometimes you have jurisdictions that are actually actively hostile towards towards this new type of security, which is in a way it's understandable. A lot of bad impressions left from ICOs. But if we have to look at Europe specifically, we can see that many, and the vast majority, I would say, of security token offerings, STOs, that are launched are very much fall under existing EU legislation or traditional securities law of member states. And just beyond member states, for example, countries like Switzerland, again, it's very much, they have their own traditional securities law, and most STOs are covered under it. Unfortunately, at the moment, there is no uniform global European taxonomy of categorizing the different crypto assets. But the great news here is that less than 2 months ago, and at the end of September this year, we saw that the European Commission actually proposed a new legislation on crypto assets. And the idea here is to harmonize the different legislation in countries so it is more uniform from EU member state to another EU member state. And this kind of shows several things. First of all, obviously, it's good if you have uniform legislation that is very vastly similar from country to country, makes doing business easier, but also shows that the Commission very much believes that digital assets in general are very important for the development of the European Union, and they will very much invest into it, and they will very much create legislation that is clear, uniform, and not hostile to these new technologies. Again, they want to foster innovation, but at the same time, they also want to protect investors. So I think they struck a nice balance between the two. And what is very exciting when it comes to innovation in asset tokenization, the European Commission has proposed a regulatory sandbox for different use cases when it comes to digital assets. So a lot of companies and institutions can actually test different types of uses of digital assets in a, let's say, more relaxed regulatory environment. So this is very exciting, and I'm pretty sure it will produce a lot of innovation in that area, and kind of will push the continent forward when it comes to digital assets. Overall, I think that again, in contrast to many different regions in the world, they've realized the importance of digital assets, and they're trying to push it forward and be at the forefront of this industry. So this is very encouraging news. And the same goes for countries that are outside the European Union, like Switzerland and Malta, for example. So we have all these four, and just to sum up, to give the main takeaways from this presentation. First of all, we talked about the overall DOT industry, the health of that industry within Europe. And we saw that the adoption rate is very high, it's 16%, and we also project to be the highest growing region in terms of spending in the next few years. Second, when it comes to the blockchain security ecosystem, we see that more than 40% of companies are in Europe. It's the highest in the world, and Europe itself is a place where you can find many major DOT hubs. Third is the access to investors. Again, there's a high concentration of capital. Some of the largest and most powerful centers in the world are in Europe, and you have this schema, the passporting within EU states that makes investing in other countries much easier. And fourth, certainly last but not least, is that the regulation right now, there's a bit of uniformity between different EU countries, but it will become even more clear cut. There'll be a clear taxonomy on crypto assets, and there will be a regulatory sandbox for innovative use cases. So very much the European Union, the European Commission is banking on this technology and will support its future development. And when it comes to other countries like United Kingdom, Switzerland, and Switzerland, they very much support. They very much also support the development of digital assets. So taking all these factors together, we see that they reinforce each other, and it's kind of a virtuous cycle. So right now, Europe is at the forefront of the token industry, and we think that in the near future, it will grow even further and further cement its position. So hopefully I convince you that asset tokenization will thrive in Europe, at least in the next few years, and the future is very much bright. If you want to learn more about that or other topics related to DOT in Europe, whatever your industry is, we cover it. So I'll be really happy to talk to you. So you can add me on LinkedIn, or you can contact me via email, and I'm happy to pick up that conversation. We have some new reports coming up on EU legislation, so that will be exciting. And yeah, I'm really glad that I got the chance to speak, and hope to get in touch with you, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Radoslav, thank you for your nice speech. We do have a few questions in the chat.
Okay, should I share my screen, or just maybe people have questions related to some of the numbers here?
Yeah, I can actually voice the questions for you so that you.
Oh, okay, sure. I mean, hopefully they are. Yeah.
One of the questions is, Radoslav, what are the practical implications for businesses from the fact that asset tokenization will thrive in Europe?
Right. Practical implications. So this means that, let's say the trajectory where things are going is very much going upward. And if you're a business that wants to get involved in that, if you want to become part of the security token ecosystem, now is the chance to jump in. And again, maybe you're a company, maybe you're an investor company that wants to get into it. Maybe you want to create your own platform to issue tokens. So it is early days, but it's not too early. And as I said, the future is bright. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity to kind of jump in and make that bet for the future. And as I said, the ecosystem is vast, so you can get involved in different areas.
Thank you for the reply. I also have a question from my side related to numbers. You previously mentioned that the DLT adoption rate in Europe, according to you, is 16%. And I've been wondering, how do you calculate the adoption rate? So does it mean that 16% of businesses who could potentially use DLT already use it, or?
Yes, yes. So as I said here, it's not even speculation. We have a massive survey that we do every year. It takes a long time to do it. Over 3,000, nearly 3,000, sorry, respondents. We look at different countries in Europe. We look at different industries, and we get their response. So we ask several questions, one of which is the adoption rate. So here we include companies that are just in the initial stages of using DOT, companies that use small-scale POC, and you have larger scale implementations. And as you can imagine, most of them on the smaller scale, most of them are on the POC side, but still, this is quite encouraging. We also had another question, which is how many of the companies are planning to test out DOT applications in the next 12 months, and the answer is 18%. So taken together, 16 and 18 will be 34. So companies adopting blockchain and planning to adopt blockchain. Now, this was done in 2019, and as you may have noticed, a lot of things have changed since 2019. So a lot of these companies may have second thoughts about using DOT, but just looking at the adoption rate, it's quite impressive.
Sure, and I hope the tokenization ecosystem in Europe will really kick in, and we see the adoption rate that everybody have been speaking about. Among other questions, there is an interesting question: could Europe have its own Silicon Valley for DLT projects?
I think there are a few centers of activity. I mean, the obvious answer here is Crypto Valley in Switzerland. But we also see smaller countries like Luxembourg and Liechtenstein kind of punching well above their weight. So I don't know if there will be something as powerful, let's say, as Silicon Valley, but I think there will be like smaller Silicon Valleys scattered throughout the continent working together. So I think, yeah, definitely. But if I have to bet in one place, it will be in Switzerland, in Crypto Valley.
Yeah, I would rather agree that we are not going to see a single Silicon Valley as we have seen it in the actual US.
Yeah.
There are many smaller Silicon Valleys related to specific industries. And this is in many senses great, the more democratization of capital and access to jobs.
Yes.
There is a last question so far from our audience. The question is, the legislation in the EU is non-harmonized between jurisdictions. As far as I understand, it is about the legislation for virtual assets. How can EU issuers avoid this problem?
How can you repeat the question again? Because hopefully you're trying to avoid regulation.
The question is about solving the problem of regulation for virtual assets not being harmonized, and the risk of being compliant in, for example, Germany, but not compliant in Liechtenstein or UK.
Yeah. I think things are moving in the right direction here, and as I said, you can read more about it. But in September, you had this announcement that that they're working on new legislation specifically for crypto assets, because generally right now asset tokenization is covered by existing traditional law, but there are some few gaps here and there for specific assets that could be technically STOs but are not covered by it. And that legislation that is proposed in September will actually target these specific cases. And the larger goal here is to harmonize it. So it will take a few months. So this will not take years, by the way. It will take some time, but it will be less than, I think, even months, less than a year for this new legislation to kick in. And then you won't have to worry. You don't have to worry that much about not being able to do business across European Union countries. So again, as I said, this is the future is bright, and things are moving in a more uniform direction in the future when it comes to legislation in Europe.
That's great to hear, and I assume we'll also have less regulatory holes when actually now exchanges, for example, crypto exchanges, can operate without being regulated at all. And the beginning of the industry, this is probably fine because you need them to start operating at least somehow. But now there may be exchanges in many countries without no regulation at all, and just saying, well, we are not regulated in our jurisdiction. We still provide service to EU investors as well, despite the fact that they should be protected by the EU law. So I hope we will see more harmonization in that sense, because it's time for the crypto industry to to harmonize somewhat and to consolidate for not following the rules to.
Yeah, I fully agree here. It's sometimes having no regulation could be worse than having hostile regulation, and that keeps a lot of capital away from asset tokenization in general, because it's understandable. Investors are more risk averse. If there are not clear-cut rules, they may try to avoid it, and that we've seen, let's say, the negative experience from ICO rub negatively on using DOT technology in other fields, whether it's supply chain management, because people have this negative impression from ICOs, which were mostly not regulated. A lot of people got burned. So having clear-cut regulation is much better. So I fully agree.
Definitely, we needed this on the beginning of the industry to start working, but to really mature, we need to go to the next step.
Yes.
Rados, I thank you for your speech. This is definitely the most data-driven speech of the entire conference, and I thank you for your participation and for insights. And I hope it inspired a lot of our viewers to pursue their digital assets business, whether it is tokenization or investment or anything in the EU.
Yeah.
I hope they can use your assistance and your advice as well in this perspective.
Yeah, thank you very much. And again, if you want to discuss this topic in more detail and other topics related to DOT, hit me up on LinkedIn. My email is rdragov@idc.com. Again, any questions that you have, you're more than welcome to contact me, and I'm happy to answer them.
Great, thank you, and have a nice day.
You too. Bye.